Hi, my name's Calvin Schnacker. Today I will be going over some of the blogs. I believe there's 6 of them, and I found them on Twitter and Instagram mostly, but some of them had accounts on both Twitter and Instagram. So we'll be going over a little bit about what I found interesting and useful in each of them, and then how they could be used in the classroom. For Holly's Clark one, I found her on Twitter, and I found her information useful because it was talking about AI usage and how to make it better for like lesson planning and stuff, which I thought was pretty cool, as it makes it a lot quicker, I thought, to make lesson plans, as well as I thought it would probably make them a little bit better. You could have it check over things, make sure there's no like little flaws here and there. As well as it could also maybe find links for like a video or an idea, or maybe even just point out some different things you could do as far as activities for the classroom. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea on what she was talking about. So I think it would probably be a little more helpful in like the higher grades, more directed towards middle school and high school, but I think it really could be used at any grade. I said the higher grades because I think that her information might help you give a little background on um, like catching students if they were cheating, or maybe what to watch for and stuff. So I thought that it might be a little more directed towards that, but really it could be used towards any because of the lesson planning. So it really goes for anything, but maybe specialized more towards those higher grade levels. But I don't think you'd really have a huge issue with that until you get up to like high school or so. But yep. The next one I found was practical tech tips or practical tech, and sorry, he was talking about just basically how to be more efficient with things. So coming up with shortcuts, which I thought was pretty cool because in the classroom, time management is really important, and utilizing time to the fullest is important. And so I thought that this would probably be, again, really useful for about any grade, but I guess it might be a little more towards, again, the higher grades, as you'd be able to show them things as they're working more one-on-one, like with their computers and stuff, rather than group discussions and stuff like that when you get to like elementary and stuff. So I thought that it could be used in any grade, as you as the teacher would be using it as shortcuts, but going to like middle school and high school, the students would be using them for their own computers and stuff, so that might make it a little bit more directed towards them, but it would be for any grade level, I thought. And then Eric Kerr I found on Twitter, and it seemed like he had a lot of things that we're talking about, like kind of seemed like there was a lot of stuff talking about upcoming events, which I didn't think was honestly all that important as far as like what I'd be able to get from it, but I think that if you were a teacher, it would be important, as it'd be important to be informed, and maybe going to those things would help you get better understanding of like, I don't know, what's going on with the like teaching segment as a whole, or maybe there's some new technology that would help you, or just kind of staying informed in loops with what's going on and things that can help you towards it. Again, I thought that this could be helpful towards any grade level, as this would apply to possibly any grade level, but I said maybe it would go more towards higher level kids, because I just think that maybe if there was some activity that was mentioned in his post, that it could, you could recommend it to a certain student or whatever, if they were really interested in, per se, robotics, and you saw something about a robotics speech or whatever, maybe you'd recommend to him to go to that, and be kind of cool for that. But I think that this really would be more directed toward teachers than it would be towards students. The next one that I found was Matt Miller, and he was on Twitter, and it looked like he'd published a book and that he taught 5th grade, and Actually, it looked like he published a few books from what I was seeing, but um, I don't know. I thought the classroom usage that it would be useful for would be like talking about some more specific things. So if you were looking towards like, oh, I'm having a problem with AI usage, and instead of just Googling it and get 50 different links on things, it'd help narrow it down to go to this guy and be like, oh, he's a reputable guy, like, looks like he's verified on Twitter, and he has good stuff. So then, you'd look for what you're looking for on his Twitter or his book, and then you would, go down the rabbit hole finding what you're looking for that way, rather than doing this big broad search and then closing it in slowly. You would just instantly get to where you want, and then maybe you narrow it down just a little bit for what you're looking for. But I thought that this would be helpful for high school, as well, really any grade level, but I don't know, I thought high school just because he might be able to, like, they'll be able to read it a little bit better, but then again, I think that, like, since he did teach 5th grade from what I saw, that might be a little bit better there, as he's probably, think he could possibly be better at the younger ones, as he has maybe more specific things, which I think in younger grades is a little bit, you're looking for more like specific things, rather than in higher grades you're looking for broader topics. But I think I might have gotten it mixed up with the next guy I'm going to talk about. But yeah, it says he teaches high school, so I must have gotten it mixed up. But that, yeah, I think he probably would be better at high school for if you were trying to direct it towards that, but I think he could maybe be elementary school. But I think really both, since he writes, it could be helpful for both of them. The next guy I found was Tim Vincent, and this guy, he does teach 5th grade. Sorry about the confusion, but it looks like he has like some lesson plans and stuff on there, and I think that that's kind of cool, because I think that a lot of the times as teachers you're either going off of what you learned like in your college, or maybe what you've seen from other teachers, but sometimes that's helpful to get an outside source and kind of get a creative look at something, a little refresher. And it kind of looked like with Tony that he had some ideas. I saw this little green light, yellow light, red light thing, and I think that that might not be something that you would see in, like, on Pinterest, for example, where you might find some lesson plans, or you'd find on like in a classroom book or whatever. I think that that's something that would maybe stand out, and I think that's kind of cool that you kind of have some creative ideas, and maybe it would help kind of get a new refresher on something if you've been giving lesson plans and you're like, oh man, this one really hasn't been working and we want to try something different. Maybe you go to this guy and you see what he has on there. But I think that he had some really good stuff. This is the guy that teaches 5th grade, and therefore I believe that he might be more directed towards the younger grades. Like, I think he might be more useful for them just because he had taught them, and it would be a little bit easier for his content to correlate, just because he has more experience and more time with them. But I think that still maybe some of the ideas that he have would be helpful towards like middle school and stuff. So I think that it could be used for something more grades, but I think that more that 3rd to 6th grade range is kind of where you're going to be getting the most out of Tony. So, yep. The next person is Jennifer Coolidge. I still don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I found her on Twitter, and her page was mostly directed towards, it looked like, teachers rather than students, which I think this is about the first one where I saw stuff that was really directed towards teachers, not just teachers in the classroom. But I thought that it was kind of cool that there was one that stood out from the rest of them. It mostly talked about basically being efficient in the classroom rather than just like kind of like that shortcut one above that I talked about. But yeah, basically making the most out of it and being efficient rather than some lesson plans or AI usage, which I think that you're going to find a ton of those on there, but using those little things add up and they make a big difference in the classroom, having that little bit of time cut off by being efficient. So I thought that was definitely very helpful. Now for the ISTE standards, I have Holly Clark. I thought that hers was probably more directed towards the 2.6 because she talks about, well, the one that I found was not using multiple AIs and just basically, instead of just using one source or whatever and just relying only on, per se, ChatGPT for everything, then instead maybe use Gemini or maybe use maybe use ChatGPT and Gemini on one thing rather than just relying on one, because if you just rely on one, then it's just like talking to one person. If you only get source from one person, you only know their side of the story rather than hearing it from two people. Then you kind of get two of them and you can compare and contrast and see what agrees. And then if you see two things that are complete opposites, well, then you might want to look into it a little bit further and see if that's true. But that's a good way to basically verify that the stuff is true and that what you're getting is good content by using multiple rather than just one. So I thought that was a good takeaway from that. And Richard Brain, his was about, again, just filtering search results, which again would just come down to efficiency. So instead of spending 10 minutes looking through something just to find what you're actually looking for, instead of kind of taking this big picture and taking it down to here for what you're actually looking for, and by doing that, it makes it a little more efficient. I said it was probably 2.7 for the ISTE standard, which that kind of applied the best there. But going on, Eric Kurtz, ISTE standard, I put him down for 2.6 because he talked about new things in Google Education. So instead of just going off of what I know from high school and college, but mostly my high school knowledge, and I guess technically through elementary started learning about it, but kind of staying in the loop and staying informed. That way you can have, you know what's going on, and you know how to, instead of having things where you're like, oh, like I had this big lesson plan and it was going to be perfect, but instead I got it messed up because I wasn't informed. Now I am because I'm checking in on Eric Kurtz's post. Yep. For Matt Miller, I put his ISTE standard as 2.1 as I found he had a post about basically he found a link to this website that would get you content for like age appropriate stuff for your grade level, which I think is really cool because I teach at KCLC and right now I'm doing this karaoke club, but it's kind of difficult because some of the things on YouTube, like you might find a song, but then it's not appropriate or whatever. Here I know what I'm getting is going to be age appropriate. I don't have to worry about double checking everything. Probably still should, but it's definitely a good way to be more efficient again and kind of filtering it out. So I have his ISTE standard as a 2.1, and then Tony Vincent, he showed me some new ways to work the Google Slides, and again, this just comes down to efficiency and knowing what's going on and staying informed, which I think is really important as a teacher. If you're going to be using technology, you need to know how to use it. So I put ISTE as a 2.1, because it would be directed towards learning and staying informed. I thought correlated. Jennifer Gonzalez, she had some memes, which was basically just keeping students engaged by having those memes, which I thought that was cool. So I put her down for 2.5 as it's talking about basically keeping them in line. And then Miss Arid, she showed me some new ways to basically put assistants on iPads to help students with their assistants with shortcuts.